Today, we're digging into an absolutely fascinating business case study. It's all about a global giant that made a bet so big it nearly broke the company, and then had to completely reinvent itself to survive. This is the story of Cemex, and it all kicks off with one gigantic number. Okay, let's start here. $5.8 billion. Now, that isn't just a number. That's the price tag on ambition. It's the down payment on a dream of total global domination that started a whole decade of chaos and ultimately transformation for one of the world's biggest companies. All right, so let's set the scene. Picture this. It's 2005. A Mexican cement company called Cemex, already a huge player, decides it's time to make a truly massive, game-changing move. They're going to acquire the UK's RMC group. This was their shot, their moment to jump from being a regional leader to an undisputed global titan. Now, you have to understand, this wasn't just buying another company. The strategy here was incredibly bold. The goal was to swallow RMC's operations, which were spread all across 22 different countries, and use that to just dominate the entire global construction market. It was a high-stakes play for total control. So how are they going to pull this off? Well, Cemex had its secret sauce, a signature strategy that had always worked for them in the past. It was called the Cemex Way, and they were about to apply it to the biggest deal they had ever done. So what exactly is the Cemex Way? Think of it like a super rigid top-down instruction manual for how to run the business. Everything was driven by IT, all focused on standardizing every last thing, centralizing all the purchasing, streamlining all the different computer systems, and just squeezing out every possible penny of efficiency. The plan was to generate a whopping $360 million in savings every year by forcing RMC to operate exactly like Cemex. And would you look at this? On paper, the strategy was a home run. An absolutely stunning success. This chart shows it all. In the places where they rolled out the Cemex Way, RMSC's operating margins just skyrocketed from a kind of sad 7% all the way up to an incredible 24%. The numbers looked fantastic. The machines seemed to be working perfectly. But, and this is a huge but, here's where the story takes a turn. While the spreadsheets looked amazing, the culture on the ground was completely falling apart. Someone described the problem as organ rejection. And this is such a classic business lesson, right? This rigid, one-size-fits-all system just completely clashed with RMC's management style in Europe, which was much more independent. It turned out to be a disastrous miscalculation. So that cultural meltdown, combined with the mountain of debt they took on for the acquisition, basically set the stage for a really, really painful decade. Cemex was now stuck paying the price for its own ambition. This timeline really puts the damage into perspective. The deal closes in 2005. Fast forward just 4 years to 2009, and the company is in so much trouble that it loses its investment-grade credit rating. That's a huge deal. It's basically Wall Street saying, we don't trust you to pay your bills anymore. A massive blow. And the pain just kept going all the way to 2020 when they finally had to take drastic action. So to stay alive, Cemex had to do a complete 180. They had to tear up their own rulebook. Their entire philosophy, which for years had been growth at all costs, got thrown right out the window. The new mantra? Strategic divestment. In other words, they had to get smaller to survive. And they were not messing around with this pivot. They kicked off a massive rebalancing of their entire portfolio. We're talking $2.2 billion in asset sales. They had to make some really tough calls, like pulling out of entire markets, the Philippines, the Dominican Republic, Guatemala, all to get that crushing debt off their backs and just get financially healthy again. And after all that pain, all that selling, you get this number, 1.81. That's Cemex's net leverage ratio. It's the lowest it had been since way back in 2007, before the crisis really hit. This was the clearest sign you could ask for that the painful pivot was actually working. So what kind of company crawled out from the wreckage of this crisis? A totally new Cemex. A Cemex that was forced to reinvent its entire identity, shifting from just being a company that sold a basic commodity to something much, much more modern. And this chart just says it all. Look at this. By 2024, a staggering 63%, nearly 2/3 of their cement sales were coming from their sustainable virtual product line. This wasn't just some small change. This was a radical transformation of their core business, putting sustainability right at the very center. So what's the big idea here? Is this just about being good to the planet? Well,
Yes and no. It's actually a brilliant business move. The new strategy was to stop focusing on selling massive volumes for cheap and instead sell sustainable products that people will pay a green premium for. This does two things. It meets customer demand and it protects the company from the future threat of carbon taxes. It's all about staying profitable for the long haul.
Okay, so we've been on this whole roller coaster, right? The huge gamble, the painful collapse, and the lean green reinvention. The company made it through, and you could argue it's stronger now than ever before. But that brings us to the final verdict, and that's up to you.
Let's just put it side by side, because it's like looking at two completely different companies. You have the old Cemex, the aggressive acquirer, obsessed with geographic size and growth at any cost. And then you have the new Cemex, a disciplined operator that values financial health and sustainable growth above all else. They basically traded one identity for another.
And that brings us to the big question I want to leave you with. By giving up its presence in those fast-growing emerging markets in exchange for a clean balance sheet and a green identity, did Cemex make a brilliant move to own the future? Or did they sell off their best engine for growth way too early? What do you think?